Ambassador Kethra of the Velanthe Empire stood at the observation deck of her diplomatic vessel, watching the blue-green planet grow larger in the viewport. Earth. The humans called it Earth, such a simple name for a world that had caused the Galactic Council so much trouble. She had been chosen for this mission because of her reputation. In 300 years of diplomatic service, she had never failed to convince a species to surrender. The Velanthe did not believe in unnecessary destruction. They preferred to offer terms, to explain the logic of submission, and to integrate new species into their empire peacefully. It was better for everyone that way. The humans had been discovered only 50 years ago when one of their primitive radio signals reached a Velanthe listening post. At first, no one paid them much attention. They were a young species, barely capable of space travel, confined to their own solar system. They had no weapons that could threaten the Empire, no technology worth stealing, no strategic value at all. But then the Korthan Confederacy had tried to claim Earth as a mining world. They had sent a fleet of 12 warships to demand the humans leave their planet or be destroyed. The Korthans were a brutal species, not given to diplomacy. They expected the primitive humans to flee or die. Neither happened. Kethra had read the reports. She had watched the recordings. The humans had fought back with weapons cobbled together from mining equipment and civilian spacecraft. They had lost millions of their own people. 3 of their major cities had been destroyed. But somehow, impossibly, they had destroyed 7 Korthan warships before the Confederacy retreated. The Galactic Council had been shocked. A pre-stellar species defeating experienced warriors. It should not have been possible. The humans had no energy shields, no faster-than-light weapons, nothing that should have worked against the Korthan fleet. And yet they had won. Since then, 5 other species had attempted to conquer Earth. All 5 had failed. The humans refused to surrender, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. They fought with a ferocity that the galaxy had never seen before. They used tactics that no other species would consider. They accepted casualties that would break any other civilization. And now the Velanthe Empire had decided that Earth must be brought under control. The Council worried that if the humans were allowed to develop, they might become a threat to galactic peace. Better to integrate them now, while they were still weak, than to face them later when they had grown strong. Kethra did not want to destroy the humans. She genuinely hoped to convince them that surrender was in their best interest. The Velanthe Empire was not cruel. Integrated species kept their cultures, their governments, their way of life. They simply had to acknowledge the Empire's authority and pay reasonable tribute. It was a fair arrangement that had worked for thousands of years. Her ship entered Earth's atmosphere, escorted by a squadron of human fighters. The humans had insisted on the escort and Kethra had agreed. It was a reasonable precaution. She had also agreed to come alone, without guards, as a gesture of good faith. Some of her advisors had warned against this, but Kethra believed in taking calculated risks. The landing site was a wide plaza in front of a building the humans called the United Nations. Thousands of humans had gathered to watch her arrive. Kethra studied them through the viewport as her ship descended. They looked so fragile. Soft skin, no natural weapons, bodies adapted for neither extreme heat nor cold. How had such creatures fought off 6 alien invasions? The ship touched down and Kethra took a deep breath. She was 4 times the height of a human, covered in thick scales that could stop a blade, and armed with claws that could tear through metal. Yet something about these small, soft creatures made her nervous. She stepped out onto the plaza and was immediately struck by the noise. The humans were cheering, not screaming in fear, not fleeing in terror, but cheering as if she were some kind of entertainment. She saw children sitting on their parents' shoulders, waving small flags. She saw vendors selling food and drinks. It was like a festival. A delegation of humans approached her. At the front was a woman with gray hair and a lined face, wearing a dark blue suit. She walked with the confidence of someone who had led armies. Ambassador Kethra, the woman said, her voice clear and strong. I am Secretary General Chen Wei. Welcome to Earth. We are honored by your visit. Kethra studied the human leader. There was no fear in her eyes, no submission, only a calm, measuring intelligence. The honor is mine, Kethra replied, using the translation device built into her collar. I come with a message from the Valanthy Empire. We wish to discuss Earth's future. Of course, Chen Wei said, smiling. But first, we have prepared a reception. You must be tired from your journey. Please, let us offer you our hospitality before we discuss business. Kethra had not expected this. In her experience, species facing conquest were either terrified or defiant. They did not offer hospitality. They did not smile. That is most generous, she said carefully. I accept. The reception was held in a large hall inside the United Nations building. Kethra was given a seat that had clearly been built specifically for her size, and she found herself surrounded by humans who seemed genuinely curious about her. They asked about her home world, her culture, her journey through space. They offered her food and drink from every corner of their planet, explaining each dish with obvious pride. We have 193 nations on Earth, one diplomat told her, and each one has its own cuisine. We could not agree on which food to serve you, so we brought something from everywhere. Kethra tasted what she could safely eat. Some of the flavors were unlike anything she had experienced before. Your people are very diverse, she observed. We are, Chen Wei agreed. We have spent most of our history fighting each other. We have different languages, different religions, different governments. We agree on almost nothing. And yet you work together now, Kethra said. The reports say that you united against the Korthan invasion. Chen Wei nodded slowly. We did. It took an alien invasion to make us realize what we had in common. We may disagree about many things, Ambassador, but we all agree on one thing. And what is that? Chen Wei's smile faded slightly, and for a moment, Kethra saw something in her eyes that she had never seen before in 300 years of diplomatic service. It was not hatred. It was not fear. It was something deeper and more dangerous. This is our home, Chen Wei said simply, and we will never give it up. The formal negotiations began the next morning in a large conference room. Kethra sat at one end of the table, and the human delegation sat at the other. There were 12 humans in total, representing different regions and governments. Chen Wei sat in the middle, clearly the leader, but she listened carefully to the others before speaking. Kethra began with the standard presentation. She showed them holographic images of the Valanthy Empire stretching across 1,000 star systems. She explained the benefits of integration, the protection they would receive, the technology that would be shared with them. She emphasized that their culture would be preserved, their governments maintained, their way of life respected. All we ask, she concluded, is that you acknowledge the empire's authority and pay a small tribute. 15% of your mineral output would be sufficient. In return, you would be protected from any future invasions. No one would dare attack a world under Valanthy protection. The humans listened quietly. They did not interrupt. They did not argue. When Kethra finished, they sat in silence for a long moment. Then a human male with dark skin and white hair spoke. His name was Ambassador Okonkwo, and he represented the African Union. Your offer is generous, he said carefully, but I have a question. What happens if we refuse? Kethra had expected this question. If you refuse, the Empire will be forced to take more direct action. We would prefer not to do this. We have no wish to harm your people. But the Galactic Council has determined that Earth must be brought under control for the safety of the galaxy. And this direct action would involve military force, Chen Wei asked. Ultimately, yes. The Valanthy Empire has a fleet of 10,000 warships. Your entire world could be subdued in a matter of hours. We do not wish to do this. We prefer diplomacy, but we are prepared to use force if necessary. The humans exchanged glances. Kethra watched them carefully, looking for signs of fear, for the moment when they would realize the hopelessness of their situation. A pre-stellar civilization against the greatest empire in the galaxy. There was no contest. But the humans did not look afraid. They looked thoughtful. "Ambassador Kethra," Chen Wei said, "we appreciate your honesty. Before we respond to your offer, I would like to show you something. I think it will help you understand us better." "Of course," Kethra said. She was curious despite herself. "What do you wish to show me?" "Our history," Chen Wei replied. They took her to a museum. It was a large building filled with objects and images from across human history. Chen Wei walked beside her, acting as a guide. "We have been fighting since before we had writing," Chen Wei explained. "Every human culture has stories of war, of conquest, of resistance. We have been killing each other for thousands of years." Kethra looked at the displays. There were primitive weapons made of stone and bone, then bronze and iron, then steel and gunpowder. There were suits of armor from leather to chainmail to full plate. There were images of battles, of armies marching across continents, of ships filling the seas. "This seems wasteful," she said. "So much energy spent on destruction." "It is," Chen Wei agreed. "But it is also who we are. We are a species that fights. We fight for land, for resources, for ideas. We fight because we are told to, and we fight because we are told not to. We fight even when it makes no sense to fight." They stopped in front of a large painting. It showed a group of soldiers standing in a ruined city, their faces covered in dirt and blood, their weapons held ready. Behind them was a flag with a red star. "This is Stalingrad," Chen Wei said. "During our Second World War, a conflict that killed 80 million people, an invading army surrounded this city and tried to take it by force. The defenders were outgunned, outnumbered, and cut off from supplies. By all logic, they should have surrendered." "What happened?" Kethra asked. "They fought for every building, every room, every staircase. The battle lasted over 5 months. More than 1 million soldiers died on both sides. The city was completely destroyed, but the defenders never surrendered. In the end, the invaders were defeated." They moved on to another display. This one showed images of a small island, with ships and aircraft attacking from all directions. "This is Iwo Jima," Chen Wei said. "Another battle from the same war. The defending force knew they could not win. They were told before the battle that none of them would survive. They fought anyway. It took over a month to capture an island only 8 miles long. Of the 21,000 defenders, only 200 survived." Kethra felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. Why did they not surrender? They knew they could not win. "Because surrender was worse than death to them," Chen Wei said. "Humans have a concept called honor. It means different things to different cultures, but at its core, it is about keeping your word, protecting your people, and never giving up. Many humans would rather die than live without honor." They continued through the museum. Chen Wei showed her examples from every continent, every era. The Spartans at Thermopylae, 300 warriors holding off an army of hundreds of thousands. The defenders of Masada, who chose mass suicide over surrender. The Zulu at Rorke's Drift, the Poles at Monte Cassino, the Koreans at Myeongnyang. "We are not a peaceful species," Chen Wei said finally, as they stood before a memorial to all of humanity's wars. "We have tried to become peaceful. We have built institutions, written treaties, created laws, but underneath it all, we are warriors. When we are threatened, we fight back. It is in our nature." "But you cannot fight us," Kethra said. "We have 10,000 warships. You have a few hundred spacecraft. The mathematics are clear." Chen Wei smiled that strange, dangerous smile again. "The Korthans had 12 warships. They had energy shields, faster than light weapons, centuries of experience. The mathematics were clear then too." "That was different. You caught them by surprise." "No," Chen Wei said. "We simply refused to give up. They expected us to surrender when they destroyed our cities. We did not. They expected us to break when they killed millions of our people. We did not. They expected us to run when they landed their troops. We did not. We fought them with everything we had, and when that was not enough, we found more. Kethra was quiet for a long moment. She had read the reports, but hearing it from a human was different. She could see the truth in Chen Wei's eyes. "What do you want me to understand?" she asked finally. "I want you to understand that we will never surrender," Chen Wei said. "Not to the Valanthi, not to anyone. You can destroy our cities, kill our people, burn our planet to ashes. We will still fight. We will fight with sticks and stones if we have nothing else. We will fight until the last human is dead. This is not a threat, Ambassador. It is simply who we are." That night, Kethra could not sleep. She lay in the special quarters the humans had prepared for her, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what she had seen and heard. In 300 years, she had negotiated with hundreds of species. She had seen warriors and pacifists, traders and explorers, species that valued life and species that valued honor. But she had never encountered anything like the humans. Most species surrendered when they realized they could not win. It was the logical choice. Fighting against impossible odds meant death, and death meant the end of everything. Better to live under a foreign power than to not live at all. But the humans seemed to think differently. They saw surrender as worse than death. They saw losing their freedom as worse than losing their lives. It made no sense from a logical perspective, but Kethra was beginning to understand that logic had little to do with it. She thought about the images she had seen. Soldiers fighting in ruined cities knowing they would die. Warriors standing against armies 10 times their size. Entire civilizations choosing annihilation over submission. It was not logical. It was not rational, but it was terrifying. The next morning she asked to see more. Chen Wei seemed pleased by the request. "We have prepared something special for you," the Secretary General said. "Several of our veterans have agreed to share their stories. I think you will find them instructive." They gathered in a smaller room, less formal than the conference hall. 3 humans sat across from Kethra, each one old and weathered, with scars visible on their skin. The first was a woman named Maria. She had fought in the Korthan invasion. "I was 17 when they came," she said, her voice steady but soft. "I lived in Buenos Aires. They bombed the city from orbit. My parents, my brother, my friends, all gone in an instant. I was at the market when it happened. I survived because I was buying vegetables. I should have been broken," she continued. "I should have given up. But when I saw the Korthan troops landing, when I saw them walking through the ruins of my city, something happened. I was not afraid anymore. I was angry." "What did you do?" Kethra asked. Maria smiled grimly. "I found others like me, survivors. We had no weapons, no training, no plan, but we had something the Korthans did not expect. We had nothing left to lose. We started small, stealing equipment, learning how their technology worked. Within a month, we had killed our first Korthan soldier. Within a year, we had destroyed an entire landing craft. With no weapons. With whatever we could find. We used knives made from broken glass. We used explosives made from household chemicals. We used their own weapons against them. We attacked at night when they could not see us. We attacked from the sewers, from the rooftops, from the ruins. We made every street a trap, every building a fortress." The second veteran was a man named Yuki. He had been a fighter pilot. "Our aircraft were not designed for space combat," he said. "The Korthans laughed at us. Our missiles bounced off their shields, our guns could not penetrate their armor. They thought we were toys. But we learned. We watched them, studied them, found their weaknesses. Their shields had a brief gap when they were recharging. Their sensors could be confused by certain metals. Their pilots were overconfident, careless. We developed new tactics. We would attack in waves, forcing them to drain their shields, then strike at the gap. We stripped our aircraft of everything unnecessary, making them faster, harder to hit. We attached explosives to mining drones and flew them into their engines. We did things that should not have worked. But they did work, Kethra asked. Yuki nodded. I personally destroyed 2 Korthan fighters. My squadron destroyed 11. We lost hundreds of pilots, but we proved that they could be beaten. That was the most important thing. We proved that they were not invincible. The third veteran was the oldest, a man named Jackson who walked with a cane. He had been a general during the Korthan War. The Korthans made one critical mistake, he said. They treated this as a military campaign. They expected us to fight like a normal enemy, to protect strategic targets, to follow rules of engagement. But this was not a military campaign for us. This was survival. We had no strategic targets to protect because they had already destroyed them all. We had no rules of engagement because we had nothing to lose. We fought everywhere, at all times, with anything we could find. We made them pay for every inch of ground, every building, every life. In the end, they retreated not because they had lost too many ships, but because they realized they could never win. They could have killed every human on Earth, but they would never have conquered us. We would have fought from the rubble, from the caves, from the ashes. We would have taught our children to fight, and their children after that. The cost of holding Earth would have been infinite. Kethra sat in silence for a long time after the veterans finished. She was beginning to understand something that the Galactic Council had failed to grasp. The humans were not like other species. They did not calculate the odds and make rational decisions. They did not weigh the costs and benefits of resistance. They simply fought. It was in their blood, in their bones, in the very fabric of their civilization. You have given me much to think about, she said finally. I am grateful for your time. That afternoon, Chen Wei took her to one more place. It was a memorial, a simple wall of black stone with names carved into it. This is for those who died in the Korthan invasion, Chen Wei said. There are 47 million names on this wall. 47 million people who died so that Earth could remain free. Kethra looked at the wall. It stretched farther than she could see, curving around the plaza like a dark ribbon. 47 million names. 47 million individuals who had once lived, laughed, loved, and dreamed. This is not a threat, Chen Wei said again. This is a promise. We will pay any price for our freedom. We have proven it before, and we will prove it again. The Valanthi Empire is not the Korthan Confederacy, Kethra said. We are stronger, more numerous, better equipped. Your resistance against the Korthans was impressive, but it would not succeed against us. Perhaps, Chen Wei admitted. You might kill us all. You might burn our planet to bare rock, but you would never conquer us. And every species in the galaxy would see what you did. They would see that you destroyed an entire civilization because it refused to kneel. How many of your subject species would start to question their own submission? How many would think that if the humans could resist, so could they? Kethra had not considered this. The Valanthi Empire maintained control through a careful balance of force and fairness. They were not tyrants, but they were also not gentle. If other species saw them exterminating a world that dared to resist, it could spark rebellions across the empire. You are more clever than I expected, she said. We have had a lot of practice, Chen Wei replied. Humans have been manipulating each other for thousands of years. It is one of our greatest skills. On her third night on Earth, Kethra asked to speak with Chen Wei privately. They met in a small garden behind the United Nations building, surrounded by plants from 100 different Earth ecosystems. I must be honest with you, Kethra said. What I have seen and heard here has disturbed me greatly. Good, Chen Wei said. That was my intention. The Empire has conquered thousands of species. We have faced resistance before. We have always prevailed. I do not doubt it. But I have never encountered a species like yours. You are not rational. You do not respond to logic or incentives. You would rather die than submit. It is, frankly, insane. Chen Wei laughed, a warm sound in the cool night air. You are not the first to say this. Our own philosophers have debated for centuries whether humanity's refusal to surrender is courage or madness. What do you think? Chen Wei was quiet for a moment. I think it is both. We are a young species, ambassador. We have only existed for a few 100,000 years. We have not had time to become wise or patient. We still burn with the fire that drove our ancestors to hunt mammoths and cross oceans. But that fire is also our greatest strength, she continued. It is what drove us to explore our world, to build civilizations, to reach for the stars. It is what makes us refuse to accept limitations, to always strive for more. And it is what makes us fight, even when fighting seems hopeless. Kethra considered this. The Velanthi were once like you, I think, young and fierce, but that was millions of years ago. We have grown beyond such primitive emotions. Perhaps, Chen Wei said, or perhaps you have forgotten what it means to fight for something. When you have everything, what is left to struggle for? The question struck Kethra harder than she expected. It was true that the Velanthi Empire had not faced a real threat in millennia. They had grown comfortable, complacent. Their military existed to maintain order, not to fight wars. The idea of an existential struggle was foreign to them. You are a fascinating species, she said finally. I find myself admiring you, even as I fear what you might become. We fear ourselves sometimes, Chen Wei admitted. Our capacity for violence is terrifying even to us. We have come close to destroying ourselves several times, but we are trying to be better. We are trying to channel that fire into creation rather than destruction. And yet you would unleash it again if we invaded. In a heartbeat. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the garden. Somewhere, a bird was singing a night song. May I ask you something personal? Kethra said. Of course. Why do you not surrender? I understand the cultural reasons, the historical reasons, but you personally, as an individual, you could live a comfortable life under Velanthi rule. You would not have to fight, to suffer, to watch your people die. Why choose suffering over peace? Chen Wei thought about this for a long time. When I was young, she said finally, my grandmother told me a story. During the Korthan invasion, she was part of the resistance in Shanghai. One night, the Korthans captured a group of fighters, including her closest friend. They offered the captured fighters a choice: betray the resistance and live, or refuse and die. What happened? All of them refused, every single one. The Korthans executed them publicly, thinking it would break the resistance's spirit. Instead, it only made them stronger. My grandmother said that watching her friend die, knowing she had chosen death over betrayal, was the proudest moment of her life. Chen Wei turned to face Kethra directly. That is why we do not surrender, because surrender would betray everyone who came before us, every ancestor who fought, every friend who died, every child who will never be born if we fail. Their sacrifice demands that we continue. To give up would be to make their deaths meaningless. Kethra felt something she had not felt in centuries, a deep, profound respect. These creatures were not just warriors. They were believers. They had a faith in freedom that went beyond logic, beyond survival, beyond even death. I think, she said slowly, that I may have been sent on an impossible mission. I think so too, Chen Wei agreed. But I am glad you came. Perhaps we can find another way. What do you mean? The Velanthi Empire wants stability. We want freedom. These goals are not necessarily incompatible. Perhaps instead of conquest, we could negotiate a genuine alliance. Kethra was surprised by the suggestion. The Empire does not form alliances with prestellar species. The Empire has never faced a prestellar species like us. The rules may need to change. It was a bold proposal. The Galactic Council would never accept it. The other member species would see it as weakness, as a precedent that could undermine the entire system. But the alternative was war. A war that would cost millions, perhaps billions of lives. A war that the Empire might win, but at what cost? And Chen Wei was right about the political implications. Destroying humanity would send a message to every subject species: submit or die. That was not the message the Valanthi wanted to send. "I cannot promise anything," Kethra said, "but I will present your proposal to the Council. I will advocate for a peaceful solution. That is all we ask." They talked late into the night, discussing the details of a possible alliance. Chen Wei was surprisingly knowledgeable about galactic politics, and she had clearly thought through the implications carefully. The humans were offering military support against external threats, technological exchange, cultural cooperation. In return, they wanted recognition of their sovereignty and a seat at the table. It was not what the Council wanted, but it might be what the Council needed. The galaxy was not as stable as it appeared. There were threats on the fringes, ancient enemies stirring, new powers rising. Perhaps a species that refused to surrender, that fought with impossible ferocity, would be a valuable ally rather than a troublesome subject. As dawn approached, Kethra stood to leave. "You have changed my perspective," she said. "I came here to convince you to surrender. Instead, you have convinced me that surrender is not possible. It is a strange feeling to be defeated by diplomacy." Chen Wei smiled. "You have not been defeated, you have been enlightened. There is a difference." 6 months later, Ambassador Kethra stood before the Galactic Council, presenting her findings. The Great Chamber was filled with representatives from 1,000 species, all watching intently as she spoke. "I was sent to convince the humans to surrender," she said. "I have failed, but I believe my failure is the best possible outcome for the Empire." There were murmurs of surprise throughout the chamber. Kethra had never failed before. Her record was perfect. "The humans are unlike any species we have encountered," she continued. "They are young, impulsive, violent. They lack our wisdom, our technology, our experience. By every measure, they should be easy to conquer. But they have one quality that makes them unconquerable. They do not surrender, not when they are outnumbered, not when they are outgunned, not when they are facing certain death. This is not a tactical choice or a negotiating position. It is their nature." She showed them recordings from the Korthan invasion, the veterans' testimonies, the memorial wall with its 47 million names, the museum of human warfare stretching back thousands of years. "If we invade Earth," she said, "we will win initially. Our technology is superior. Our forces are larger. We could devastate their planet in hours. But then the real war would begin. Every city would become a battleground. Every survivor would become a fighter. They would use every weapon, every tactic, every trick to hurt us. They would attack our supply lines, our outposts, our ships. They would make us pay for every inch of ground with blood. And they would never stop. We could kill 90% of their population, and the remaining 10% would keep fighting. We could burn their cities to rubble, and they would fight from the rubble. We could kill every adult, and the children would grow up fighting. The occupation would cost us more than any war in our history." The council was silent. These were not the words they had expected to hear. "But the military cost is not the worst part," Kethra continued. "The worst part is what our victory would mean for the Empire. Right now, our subject species accept our rule because it is fair. We protect them, we develop their worlds, we share our technology. We are conquerors, yes, but we are benevolent conquerors. If we destroy humanity for refusing to submit, that image changes. We become tyrants. We become the species that commits genocide against anyone who says no. How long before other species start to wonder if they could resist too? How long before our subjects become our enemies?" She paused, letting her words sink in. "I propose an alternative," she said. "Instead of conquest, we offer alliance. The humans would maintain their independence, but they would be bound to us by treaty. They would contribute military forces to the Empire's defense. They would share their technology and culture. In return, we would protect them from external threats and give them a voice in galactic affairs." "This is unprecedented," one of the counselors objected. "We have never allied with a prestellar species." "We have never faced a prestellar species that could destroy 7 Korthan warships," Kethra replied. "The humans are exceptional. They require exceptional treatment." "You are asking us to show weakness," another counselor said, "to admit that we cannot conquer a single planet." "I am asking you to show wisdom," Kethra said. "There is no shame in recognizing when force is not the answer. The humans have a saying, you can win every battle and still lose the war. If we conquer Earth, we may win the battle, but we will lose something more important. We will lose who we are." The debate lasted for weeks. There were many who opposed the alliance, who saw it as setting a dangerous precedent. But in the end, Kethra's arguments prevailed. The Council agreed to offer humanity an alliance instead of conquest. When Kethra returned to Earth with the news, she was greeted as a hero, not because she had convinced the Council, but because she had listened. She had taken the time to understand humanity, to see them as they truly were, and to find a solution that worked for everyone. "You did it," Chen Wei said, embracing her in the human fashion. "You actually did it." "We did it together," Kethra replied. "Your people's refusal to surrender made this possible. If you had been willing to submit, the Council would never have considered an alternative." "Then perhaps stubbornness is a virtue after all." "In your case, it certainly is." The treaty was signed a month later, in the same plaza where Kethra had first landed. Billions of humans watched as their leaders put their signatures on the document, securing their place in the galaxy not as subjects, but as partners. In the years that followed, humanity proved to be everything Kethra had predicted and more. They were difficult allies, stubborn and argumentative, always pushing for more, never satisfied with what they had. But they were also loyal, brave, and incredibly creative. They developed new technologies that amazed even the oldest species. They won battles that should have been impossible. They explored regions of space that others feared to enter. And they never, ever surrendered. When the Dractor Collective invaded the galaxy's eastern rim, humanity was among the first to respond. Their ships were smaller and less powerful than the Valanthy vessels, but they fought with a ferocity that stunned the invaders. Human captains would ram their ships into enemy dreadnoughts rather than retreat. Human soldiers would hold positions until the last man fell. Human pilots would fly into the heart of enemy fleets on missions they knew were suicidal. The Dractor had conquered 100 species, but they had never faced anything like humanity. Within 3 years, they were suing for peace. The terms were generous by human standards, which meant they were merely harsh by anyone else's. Kethra watched it all with a mixture of pride and awe. She had been right about the humans. They were exactly what the galaxy needed. On the 10th anniversary of the Alliance, she returned to Earth for a celebration. Chen Wei was there, older now but still sharp, still fierce. They embraced like old friends. "You know," Kethra said, "I came here to conquer your world. Instead, your world has conquered me." Chen Wei laughed. "That sounds about right. Humanity has a way of doing that." "I have learned much from your people," Kethra said. "Before I met you, I believed that logic and reason were the highest virtues. I believed that surrender in the face of overwhelming force was the rational choice. Your species has taught me otherwise." "And what have you learned?" Kethra thought about it for a moment. "That there are some things worth dying for. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the decision that something else is more important. That the spirit of a species cannot be measured by its technology or its numbers, but by what it is willing to sacrifice." She looked out at the crowd of humans celebrating below. Young and old, from every nation and culture, united by their refusal to bow to anyone. "I understand now why humanity never surrenders," she said. "It is not because you are irrational or foolish. It is because you know something that we had forgotten. Freedom is not given. It is earned. Every generation must be willing to fight for it, to die for it, to sacrifice everything for it. The moment you stop fighting, you start losing. Chen Wei nodded slowly. Perhaps that is why we were destined to be allies, she said. You have the wisdom of age. We have the fire of youth. Together, we are stronger than either of us could be alone. Together, Kethra agreed, and never surrendering. Below them, the crowd began to sing. It was an old song, one that humanity had sung for centuries. Kethra did not understand all the words, but she understood the spirit behind them. It was a song of defiance, of hope, of unbreakable will. And as the song rose into the night sky, Ambassador Kethra of the Valanthe Empire finally understood why humanity never surrendered. It was not about winning or losing. It was about being true to who they were. It was about honoring those who had come before and protecting those who would come after. It was about standing up and saying, "This is who we are, and we will not be broken." That was the lesson she had learned on Earth. That was the truth she would carry with her for the rest of her long life. And that was why, when the histories were written, they would say that humanity's greatest victory was not won with weapons, but with spirit. They never surrendered, and they never would.